Okay, good evening and welcome to the last chapter of The Living Marriage, chapter number 36, where we finally conclude this amazing book. We started, I guess, about 18 weeks ago. So it's not really the final one because I'm going to do an outro. He does have at the end of this book, he has an appendix where he discusses a deeper look around five of the topics discussed in this book, a deeper look at shalom, a deeper look at having children, a deeper look at the spirit of intimacy, a deeper look at kavod, a deeper look, wisdom of the heart. I'm not going to go through these things also because it's really very textual. He's quoting from a lot of text and really giving a very more spiritual analysis of these things. And my whole perspective, the reason I chose this book is because of the concept of intimacy. I wanted to talk about the physicality and the enjoyment that you're supposed to have with it. So let's end off what the author tells us in the last chapter. The last chapter is titled Finding the Straight Path. This whole section has been dealing with the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and telling you, where it came from, the sin of Adam Arishon. Now, back to the bedroom. How do you balance it? How do you figure it out? You have the Yetzer Hara. How do you balance not giving into your Yetzer Hara? The Yetzer Hara, according to the author, you have to be very careful that you shouldn't arouse the Yetzer Hara in vain when you don't need to, right? If you have a desire for your wife, he said, then you should engage in marital relations with your wife. But he quoted the Ravid earlier. The Ravid says that if you just decide you want to, you're not really in the mood or you don't have a strong desire, you just want to have fun. So that's not okay according to the Ravid and according to the author. So how do you balance those two? When do you know? It's not easy to figure out exactly when it's an actual need that you need to do with your wife. And obviously, if it's a chiyuv ona, it's a time, according to the author, when, once a week or twice a week, or some people every day, that they have a chiyuv ona, so then you have to do it that time, mitzvah ona. Or, obviously, if the night of the mikvah, or if you're going on a journey or something like that, or you see in your wife that she needs it, those are all chiyuvim, those are obligations. But the question is, when you don't need to do it, can the man do it if he feels a need? So the Ravid said if he feels a real need, he can do it. But how do you know? Maybe it's Yetzer Hara. So he says, up until now, he said, the Ravid says, when you feel a need. So everyone would think, okay, I feel I'm in the mood for it. So good, go ahead and do it. However, he brings Chazal, which is a famous Chazal. It was quoted many times in throughout Shas. The Gemara says, Ever katan yesh ba'adam, aspio roiv marivo saveya. A person has a small organ in his body. The way this organ works is that if you satiate it, you fill it up, it becomes hungry. And if you make it hungry, cause it to fast, it's full. So almost all the Mefarshim explain is referring to the Aver, the genitals, the male genitals. So if you engage in it too much, then you always want more. You have hunger, right? It seems like it's saying, Marivo is recommending, the Gemara is recommending, this is the way most Mefarshim understand it, the best way to do is Marivo, to make it, Ra'av is a hunger, it's a famine. Make it, don't give in to your desires, make it very hungry, right? Don't do it as little as possible, and you'll be full. Because obviously being full is the best thing, because then you don't have to engage the Yetzer Hara. The best thing is to avoid the Yetzer Hara. So the best thing is even recommending that you should try to not engage as much as possible. But what about the Ravid, who said that if you have a need, a legitimate need, that you feel you have a need for your wife, then you're able to do it, even if it's not one of the chiyuvim in the Torah. It's an obligation that the Torah imposes you to do for your wife. So he says, the evil inclination that entered man after the sin of the tree of knowledge can produce needs, quote unquote, which are based entirely on imagination and falsehood. When Chazal warned that one who feeds his desires causes them to increase, they're referring to imaginary desires to the evil inclination. Feeding falsehood gives it the power to grow stronger. This is easy to understand. After all, you can't really satisfy something that was never really there in the first place. Not only that, but acknowledging falsehood as a real power will give it even more power. In this context, Chazal warned us that one who gives the small organ, quote unquote, what it seems to want will just make it even hungrier for more of the same. So he says anything which comes from your imagination, that's a false need. You don't really need it. You have to be very discerning to know when you really need it and when you don't really need it. So, I assume, I don't know what he means by imaginary. I assume a man walking in the street sees an attractive woman. Oh my gosh, I want to be with this woman. So he goes home. He's with his wife. Maybe that's an actual need that he needs to be with his wife, or he hasn't been with his wife for a long time. I don't know. Some people go for a long time. We'll see at the end of the chapter. It brings an interesting story about a rabbi who wasn't together with his wife for 7 years. Um, but he wasn't together for a long time. I don't know. They pushed it off for a week or two. I think like the average man after 7 days feels a strong desire to be with his wife. And going 2 weeks is almost torture not to be with his wife if you're not going to masturbate, basically. So, this period of nida, I don't understand it at all. It's too long. There's no way the Torah would enforce something that's impossible. You're not allowed to masturbate, and you have to wait usually at least around 2 weeks. In case of nida, it's an impossible situation. Literally, it's torture for the last 3 or 4 days. So, that's something we'll talk about at a different time. But the point is over here is that listen, you have imagination, you have real desire. So if like he brings the Goran Ksubos, he saw someone's wife, so he had a real desire, but or you haven't done it in a long time, a real desire. But I don't know, imagination. I don't know exactly what he means by imagination. Maybe that's what he means. Imagination. You see a woman in the street. Maybe that's what, I don't know. Or you're thinking about these things too much. He doesn't say what he's talking about. That's the problem. He says the ones are of imagination. I mean, when you have a desire, you imagine being together with your wife, or being together with another woman, at least fulfill it through your wife. So, it's hard to understand exactly what he means by imagination. And he doesn't tell you. And he says, he continues the chapter, finding the middle path. You have to somehow find the middle path. He brings more from the Ravid, which is really all the sources. The Ravid says over here, I'll read the English over here. We can explain further the frequency of one's obligation of ona is in order to fulfill the desire of the wife, and it is forbidden to minimize his obligation without her consent, right? For the woman, ona is for the woman, you have to do it. Yet if the man needs intimacy, he has permission to do this, to engage in intimacy for his own need. For this is the fourth intention, which I mentioned above, which can help one to be saved from sin, right? Like he said, the Shulchan Aruch says. I already saw a little bit in the appendix. He discusses that the Shulchan Aruch is very troublesome. The Shulchan Aruch says many times that the whole point of being together with your wife is just to remove you from sin, and you should never enjoy it at all. This whole book, he's trying to say that enjoyment is a positive thing as long as it brings you to unify with your wife. That's the point of intimate relations, is unification, to be a whole person, a complete person, and that's when the Shekhinah comes, when you're a whole person. So even the Ravid says the point is to be safe from sin. And with this intention, they warned us to stand against evil inclination. This is the Ravid speaking. One must push it away with his left side by not fulfilling all of one's desires, and at the same time embrace with the right hand in order to not negate his time, his obligation of intimacy. Perhaps as one subdues his inclination and is fighting with it, he will negate from fulfilling his obligation. So he even says in Hebrew, he has to make sure, even when you're doing it for a need, you shouldn't be mamali kol tavaso. You shouldn't enjoy it as much as possible. You should leave over a little bit. It doesn't tell you. The Ravid is famous also when you eat a piece of bread, also leave over. When I was in yeshiva, people left over a little bit of their bread after breakfast because you shouldn't eat your entire piece of bread. You shouldn't have so much taiva in your life to show that you're fighting against the Yetzer Hara, who's telling you not to eat a whole piece of bread. It's famous from the Ravid, and this is exactly what he's saying over here, that you should enjoy it as not as much as possible. Leave over something for the Yetzer Hara. You should embrace it. You have to perform for your needs and for your wife's needs, but leave over a little bit. Don't enjoy it fully. And then he says the last thing I'll quote from the Ravid. He quotes the whole purpose of the Yetzer Hara in this world. He said if the world was created without the Yetzer Hara, it would be great for the Rishayim because they can do whatever they want. But the reason the Yetzer Hara was created is for the Tzaddikim. The whole purpose of Yetzer Hara is, if it wasn't there, it would be bad for the righteous people who are constantly battling with their physical desires to direct their intentions to that of the Creator. They're trying to find this balance. They're trying to know when to give in to their desires for the right time and when not to. So they have to find this balance. That's the whole point of this world. And I always say, it's just the whole point of this world. You should just sit a person in front of a computer screen that is unfiltered, And the question is, will you press the button to go to the porn and the breast not? That's really all you should do. Because that's really all the world is. Just that's the whole point of the world. No, it's not the whole point of the world. Um, so, in response to what the author is saying over here, um, if you listen to any of my other lectures on this book, you obviously know my understanding of this topic is that you should enjoy it as much as possible. Um, for you, not for your wife, for you. Obviously, when you have obligation for whatever your wife, whatever Chazal interpreted for your wife, you have to do it for your wife. But you also want to do it for you and want to enjoy it. And part of marriage, the reason you get married is to be able to do this and to enjoy yourself as much as possible. I think it's Yetzer Hara I've mentioned. The evil inclination tells you not to enjoy it as much as possible and scares not only people but also the Gedolei Poskim that wrote about it. You should engage with fear, and you should minimize, like the Ravid, you should minimize your desires as much as possible. And Chazal, when they said that you have an Aver Katan Ba'adam, right? Marivo Saveya. If you make it hungry, it'll be satiated. Maspio Raiv, and if you give into it too much, you'll be hungry. It doesn't say what's good or what's bad. It just says the facts. The facts are true, right? If you're constantly engaged in having sex, having relations with a woman, you're going to want it more. Is that bad? It's not bad. It's great. That's the best part of life. It doesn't. Why do we interpret it in the negative way, right? Marivo Savea. You're satiated. You're not going to be in the mood for it. You're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to enjoy the best part of the world. So why would you want that? You must be alright. You should do it as much as possible, at least when you enjoy it. So I disagree with fundamentally with this whole thing, and the author maintains throughout the book that dealing with the Yetzer Hara, there's obviously Yetzer Hara to overindulge in this area. You have to be very careful. But point number one I'll say is that if your wife knows that you're holding a little bit back, she's not going to enjoy it. She's going to be angry at you. What? I'm lower than you. You're higher than me. You're the rabbi over here. That you don't lower yourself in his base enjoyment. And I enjoy it, and you don't want to enjoy it fully. And she'll catch on. Trust me, she'll catch on. Even if you're very skilled at faking her, she'll catch on. Women understand these things very well, and they're not going to want to be with you, with the husband, if they're doing it just for them. They want you to enjoy it also. That helps them enjoy it. So if you want to really fulfill the mitzvah of helping them enjoy the mitzvah of creating ona for them, right? You should make sure to enjoy it yourself, because they'll tell that they won't enjoy it fully if you're not enjoying it fully. That's just the reality. That's the truth. And the last point I'll end off with is the story. He ends off with, it's never too late. I'll just summarize the story because it's a little late over here. This is a story, the way he describes the person was, there was once a certain Torah scholar who was very knowledgeable in many areas of Torah, but he didn't have a proper grasp of its perspective of intimacy. He didn't understand the Torah's concept of intimacy. So one of the students of this big rabbi, seems like maybe a Gadol Hador, maybe, he came to him. He had problems with he couldn't have kids. It wasn't really. And when he sat down with him and he tried to help him, figure out IVF, I don't know exactly what he helped him with. He realized there's a problem with Shalom Bayis, and he gave him a class because this is what he gives vadim. He was giving counsel on being a chassan teacher. That's what he was doing. That's why he wrote this book. So he told him, and he realized he had a problem with Shalom Bayis because he wasn't engaging in intimacy properly, because he heard the chassan classes from his Rebbe, who didn't understand this concept properly, and helped the Shalom Bayis. But then, the student, I guess, went in bed and told his Rebbe that now it's okay to indulge sometimes with the right balance. And his Rebbe was infuriated. He called the author into his office, and he started yelling at him. And the author yelled back at him. He said, "What do you mean? You're a Torah scholar, but you're an ignoramus. You're an Amma Aretz when it comes to intimacy." And after this incident happened, he says the next morning, the author said, "I went to the Mir Yeshiva as usual, and at 10 a.m. I received a message from one of the Gedolei Yisrael that I had been summoned to come before a Beis Din for humiliating a Torah scholar." You're not allowed to humiliate anybody, but certainly it's a grave issue to humiliate a Talmud Chacham. He humiliated a Talmud Chacham. So they came before the Dayan. The Dayan said, "What'd you do?" And he said, "I called an Amma Aretz for not being ignorant in marital intimacy. He doesn't know about this properly." And the Dayan said, "You're right. You're right." And I guess the story was the young man had a not only the Shalom Bayis approval, he also had a baby. I don't know that. I don't know what correlation knowing about intimacy helped with infertility. And the Talmud Chacham came to him after about a year later. He asked him to come in, and he asked me, when I was accused of not fulfilling the obligation of an owner and being a sinner, was I just trying to upset him, or did I actually suspect that was true? Right? When this author, did he really know about the Talmud Chacham that he, right? And of course, he said he really knew about it, and this Talmud Chacham admitted, he says, he admitted up to that point he had not had relations with his wife for 7 years, Talmud Chacham says. During that period, he had inadvertently lost his seed many times, and he also fasted many times to try to atone for the serious transgression. This is a Talmud Chacham. He says he was teaching Torah to the multitudes, this rabbi, maybe one of the Gedolei Hador, and he didn't have relations with his wife for 7 years. Now, he was probably advanced in age. I don't know, probably in his 60s or 70s. He was a big Talmud Chacham, 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, it's common in a lot of marriages that, you know, they don't have, when they get older, they have sexless marriages. I mean, it's pretty common, I think. I don't know exactly the statistics. But, you know, after the wife, you know, has menopause and she can't have children anymore, you know, technically you have a chiyuv to do ona still, but she could always be mocha on the ona. You could always force. The wife's always going to want it. I mean, if you have a normal husband, the wife's always going to want it, and you could force her. You could say she'll try to move out there. Yeah, the husband doesn't want to do it anymore because he wants to cut back on his taivas as he gets older and get closer to olam haba. He wants to get closer, get more away from his taivas, so she'll oblige, even though she really doesn't want to. So whenever a wife is mocha, she's never really mocha. I don't think a mocha wife could be mocha alone. It's machlokas whether she could be mocha on her own or not. But even if she's mocha, it has to be a real mechila. But there's a lot of Talmidei Chachamim. You see from the story that it's very common, and I'm not just Talmidei Chachamim, older people also. But the fact is that someone who's a Talmud Chacham, you know, who's stringent in all other aspects. So you learn from here, you see that it's important that to notice that it's not just regular people, Talmidei Chachamim, and maybe even more Talmidei Chachamim, because they have a lot of Yiras Shamayim and they're learning these Sfarim, the Ravid all the time. And I'll be honest with you, I was, you know, also learning the Muslim Sfarim for many years. And when you're learning Gemara all day, you know, you feel that the Yetzer Hara is telling you, have Yiras Shamayim, avoid pleasures in this world. And I imagine there's a lot of Talmidei Chachamim. The Gedolei Hador, it could be some Gedolei Hador. I'm not saying which, I don't know, but I'm saying it's very possible some Gedolei Hador do not know anything about this, or do not, you know, for years haven't been together with their wives, and yet they're they're asked by all people of Klal Yisrael for advice on anything. This is a big rabbi. It doesn't say who the rabbi was, if he was one of the Gedolei Hador, but he was a big rabbi. He was teaching Torah to many people, had his own yeshiva, Rosh Yeshiva, and he was completely ignorant, had separated from his wife for 7 years. So you see that it's pretty prevalent even among the Talmidei Chachamim. And because of Sfarim like this, we tell you to balance it. And, you know, this author, and just a summary of this author, you know, he's doing a big service to a lot of people in Klal Yisrael, because a lot of people are like this Rosh Yeshiva, who think it's a terrible thing and be afraid of it and don't get any hana at all, or like the Ravid says, don't get full hana, the full benefit when you're in the bedroom. But the truth is that the author did a nice thing by writing this book, and a lot of people, Gedolim probably encouraged him to write this book, to say it's not completely bad. It's not completely bad, and you should enjoy it. The man has a right to enjoy it, but not fully. He calls it the end of the chapter, not fully. You have to balance it, because if you're enjoying it fully, you're giving in to your Yetzer Hara, because the Yetzer Hara, right? The Yetzer Hara controls this, and if you give too much into your taivas, right? You're not someone, like the Ramban says, Novel B'Shas HaTorah, you're someone who's enjoying yourself too much. You're enjoying yourself on imaginary desires that you think, falsehoods that you think is a desire, not a desire. So he's doing a great service over here that's saying it's not completely bad, it's a positive thing. He's at least half doing something. And obviously he says the purpose of enjoying it is to help unify you and your wife and get you in touch with the feminine part of yourself, which is entirely from your wife. You can't get a feminine side from the man himself, because you're busy learning Torah and you don't know how to cook or clean or take care of the house, take care of the children, and change diapers. But you have to get in touch with the feminine side of yourself, which is your wife. So, and the greatest unification is in the bedroom when you're together. And that's when the Shekhinah comes, because you're a complete person. And that's the purpose of the enjoyment in the bedroom, is to help facilitate that, not just to have children, but to facilitate the unification, which is the ultimate Hashras HaShekhinah, bringing you closer to Hashem. And that's the purpose of unification, of being together in the bedroom. That's the purpose of enjoying it in the bedroom. But of course, he says it's not an enjoyment into of itself. You're not supposed to enjoy it just for the sake of enjoyment. And anyone who does that is a sinner. So he's half helping the world and half not helping the world. The frum community that believes, there's a considerable amount of from people in the frum community, especially people who are avreichim and read Musar Sfarim too much, and read Musar. I think the whole concept of Musar it's a new concept, and I think it's a terrible concept, because the more Musar you learn, the more further away you become from the pleasures of this world. Of course, it tells you, all these Musar Sfarim tell you to avoid pleasure as much as possible. To only do what's necessary, and whatever is necessary to do for avodas Hashem. So it really, when you're learning Torah the whole day, you're engaged in Kedusha, and you're learning Musar Sefer all Sfarim also. It's very bad for the human condition. It's very bad. It goes against nature. It goes against your natural desires, and it's sad, but a lot of from people, even her Shomer Torah mitzvos, and keep halacha meticulously and kashrus and things like that, only the best echsherim, they're very negligent, and more negligent than the rest of the populace in terms of, fulfilling even their basic responsibilities in the bedroom. Certainly their basic responsibility to themselves of enjoying it. This is the main enjoyment. It's why you get married. The enjoyment is to enjoy the bedroom. Not so the author is half helping, right? He's telling people that this Rosh Hashiva are clearly wrong, that it's not a terrible thing. It's a good thing. Use it in the right proportion, in the right balance, at the right time, in the right way. But he does not give a full heter, a full permission to, engage in it whenever you desire, and enjoy it fully. That he's leaving off over here. And that I'm adding in. That's why this book, in my perspective, is you got to enjoy it fully. The Yetzer Hara is telling you not to enjoy it fully. You have to enjoy it as full as possible. And once you get to that point where you can enjoy it fully, you say it's okay to enjoy fully, that's really where it starts. That's the beginning of the bedroom. Because once you realize that the man realizes that he should and could enjoy it as much as possible, then you start to experiment with different things. I'm not going to get into all the things you experiment with. Everyone, when they reach that level, they can start experimenting with some things they saw in movies when they were younger, or things they heard, or talk to their friends, or talk to their wife who was talk to their friends, because women talk about these things. So then you can start experimenting. So you can only start intimacy in the bedroom. That's why I'm including this book. You can only start intimacy in the bedroom when you've reached the point where you've moved on from even this author, and you realize, you listen to me, and you realize that you're supposed to enjoy the bedroom as much as possible, not just for your wife, but you also. You're supposed to enjoy as much as possible. Once you realize that, and you're determined to follow that, then you can start experiment and amping up your experience in the bedroom to its fullest. And that's really what the secular world does. The secular world has it right. The frum world has it wrong. The secular world has it right. It's completely mutter. Not only a mutter, it should be amplified and expanded and elaborated on and experimented with as much as possible. That's the conclusion of today's shir. I will try to give an outro to this book next week. I believe on Monday. Monday is Tainus Esther, but we'll see. Try to give an outro, summarize what he talks about in the appendix, and leave you off, with a summary of what I got from this book and what I can leave you. What message I can leave you with when we depart from this book. Hope you enjoyed today's lecture. See you in the next one.